Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today, happy Wednesday for you listening to it. We got a great day ahead of us, great day to be great as always, and we got some NFL goodness to break down. As always, focusing on fantasy football, we got some value, some people against current ADP that we like, and by we, I mean myself, and of course, our usual Wednesday guest, PFF's own Andrew Erickson, you can find on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. Andrew, happy June, man. Hope you had a good Memorial Day. And here we are, just 3 more short months, Andrew, till we get live football. I get shorter than that preseason. Shorter than 3 months, Andrew, till we get football on our TVs again.
I cannot wait. We've already got some of these beat reports trickling in. Joe Burrow's arm basically looks like a cannon is one of the latest things that I've seen. And as someone that has a ton of Joe Burrow in Underdog, I'm really happy to hear that. So
his arm looks like a cannon, but he's worried about his leg explosiveness. So people are just, moving him up and down the ranks back and forth as soon as they get into our press conference going. But we are going to be paying attention to both what we personally think with the ranks, but more importantly, the public. I hope you all have been liking the Fantasy Files, the single solo episodes. But, as much as I do want to zoom in on certain players and go through the offseason, I also realize, hey, if you're doing best ball drafts right now, you don't really have time to study all 90 guys. You just want to hear who Andrew and I are really liking at value at the moment. So we're going to go over 10 guys that we believe are just mispriced because they should be ranked far higher than they are over at Underdog Fantasy right now. So, Andrew, why don't you start things off with a certain troubled wide receiver from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Antonio Brown currently going as the wide receiver 47. And I think it's because, do people know that he's actually back on the team? I know there was a gap in time where he was the only player that hadn't got re-signed yet. And I think even PFF, or one of our fantasy accounts, that tweeted out that he was back, and it was like a little bit before he actually signed with the team. But they were right; he did end up signing with the team, so our social team knows what's up. But the thing with him is, when he was on the team last year with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, they were all basically producing the same type of fantasy numbers. Like, there wasn't really a discrepancy. You look at the target share; it was pretty flat across the board. And Mike Evans had more fantasy points per game, followed by Godwin and then Brown, but it was marginal at best, and really it was because Mike Evans was catching, touchdowns seemingly every single week. But when you look at the efficiency standpoint, the efficiency stance, it's Antonio Brown kind of like leads the pack. If you look at fantasy points per snap, last year it was Devontae Adams number 1, Tyreek Hill number 2, Antonio Brown number 3. Like, that's, you think that I was reading that stat from like 2 or 3 years ago, but that was last year. He was in the discussion with Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. And look, you can cherry pick stats all you want, but to be associated with those guys after last year is a really good thing. And at wide receiver 47, it's like, look, the risk is that he doesn't play next year because he gets in trouble. Like, okay, that's definitely factored into his price though, where he's basically free, 25% target rate per route run, which is number 1 in the Buccaneers. And, he led the Buccaneers in PFF receiving grade too. So everything points to him, not being washed. I know this is an ageist podcast and we don't like the older receivers, but, he's going to be 33 this year. I don't really think I saw much of him last year that was, he's not the same elite player that we once knew as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, but you're not expecting that out of a guy you can get outside the top 45 guys. So for me, I think Antonio Brown, especially in a best ball format, he offers the same type of upside as a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin and doesn't cost any of the same price.
You're correct, Andrew. It's an ageist podcast, but only if you look old in football years. That's why Tom Brady is still not on the list and doesn't exactly seem poised to be on there anytime soon. But great points all around. Currently sitting there with the wide receiver 47 ADP. I did not list him because you did, but I would have if you didn't, Andrew, because he is my wide receiver 33. I understand you're taking Godwin and Evans way ahead of him, and you should. But yeah, just compared to where he's currently going, man, makes absolutely no sense. In 2020, Godwin was the wide receiver 15. in PPR points per game. Evans was the wide receiver 16. AB was the wide receiver 23. There's only an 11 target disparity between the three in the 12 games with Brown and the offense. And for the ADP to be literally a 30 spot difference, this doesn't make any sense. I don't even know if it's people are down on Antonio Brown, the player. I think it has to do with him as a person. And you know what? If you want to go through your whole draft, not picking players that you don't think are good human beings, more power to you, but that is not what we're doing here. And because of that, Antonio Brown is a screaming value. So he's got got the contract. He needed to pass a physical with his knee thing. That is done, and he looks good. He had a 16-game pace last year, man. 90 catches, 966 yards, 8 touchdowns from the regular season. Might have even been hiked up if we include the playoffs. So Antonio Brown, still very much a very good football player, currently being priced as much more of a meh option. Andrew, I got a wide receiver that is from AB's old team next. That is Diontae Johnson. I did not, again, I like this exercise because when I went through and compiled my ranks, like I came up with some guys that I didn't even think I was like overly high on. Right. I love Diontae Johnson. You love Diontae Johnson. For some reason, Diontae Johnson has an ADP as a wide receiver at 25 right now. Like, we can go through his games and you pick out, the spots. Like, if you had him last year, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you got burned from Diontae having not just games he missed, but like 2 or 3 games where he only played a couple snaps and it just didn't work out. With all that said, not even excluding those games, not even just accounting for only Ben being on the field, he was a PPR wide receiver 22, even before moving all that stuff. So for me, we're seeing Diontae priced at the bottom when, if you just look, again, now if we put those qualifiers in, we look at the games where he wasn't injured and we had Ben under center. I mean, the target totals in these 12 games, people, 10, 13, 15, 10, 11, 16, 13, 12, 7, 13, 14, 16. And in the 7 target game, God forbid you only get 7 targets. That was the one game against the Bills where they finally had enough with the drops and they pulled him for like the second quarter only to put him back in there. So Diontae, man, again, we already saw what his floor is with this sort of role. That was last season. That was with the drops. So no, it's not ideal. But we also, we're being pretty selective with who we're penalizing for drops. It's kind of like the injury thing. Like, how come DK Metcalf and him, having double-digit drops, he doesn't hear anything about that? You know why? Because he's awesome, and he shouldn't hear anything about it. So I just think that, we're kind of picking and choosing who to penalize with the drops. I think people as a whole are really down on the Pittsburgh Steelers, which, hey, I get if you don't think they're going to be a great NFL team. Big Ben's not looking, fantastic. But as bad as he looked last year, again, Diontae still did all this. My final note here, and just really, if you're holding on to that drop number, it's just, at least for fantasy football, we don't care. I mean, in 2012, here's the list of players that had 10 drops. So imagine if you just faded these guys from now on after they dropped the ball a lot of times in one year. Jimmy Graham, Wes Welker, Calvin Johnson, Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall, Dez Bryant, Victor Cruz, Demaryius Thomas, T.Y. Hilton, A.J. Green, the list goes on and on. So for me, Andrew, it's a situation where Diontae, we know he's got wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes if he gets that same target total as he did last year. And people, for whatever reason, they're not buying into it.
Don't get it. Should be able to buy into Diontae Johnson easily. Again, you mentioned the targets are all there for him for the taking. Big Ben loves throwing him the ball. It's not like Big Ben's his arm is probably not going to get any better throwing downfield. So Diontae Johnson still remains that intermediate target. Najee Harris is obviously going to get his in the passing game as well. Yeah. But Diontae Johnson, to kind of add another stat, second in expected fantasy points per game last season in all the games that he was healthy in. So the opportunity was there. And look, as someone that is a Patriots fan and gets to see a ton of N'Keal Harry every single week, I would love it if N'Keal Harry had more drops. Would be dying to see N'Keal Harry drop the ball, because that's what it means. It means that, no, they're not a bad player. It means that they're open. That's the number one thing with receivers is can you get open and can you throw them the ball? The drop is more of like a concentration thing than anything else. And if you think about Diontae Johnson, where he's on the field, it's closer to where defenders are, because he's closer to the line of scrimmage. So maybe he just want to get plastered by another dude, a creeping safety or linebacker. That's why he's dropping more passes. If you had some of these receivers running more intermediate routes, they'd probably drop more passes too. So stop fading Diontae Johnson. Don't fade the drops. Buy into the drops. Buy the dip, because like you said, that really makes a bigger point too with the value is finding players that are not being market priced according to their situation that other players are. Talk about some players get moved because of injuries and some don't. So trying to find those players is a really easy way to find value.
All those injured games, the missed games, and still, in freaking 16 combined regular season and playoff games, Andrew, the guy had 160 targets. He's a wide receiver 25. He's a young up-and-coming stud that had 116 targets in 16 games impacted by injury last year, and you can have him as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. Draft Diontae Johnson on every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. Andrew, tell me a little bit about the Jets' likely new number 1 wide receiver.
Corey Davis. What did Corey Davis do to people to make everybody hate him so much? All he did last year was ball out, 6th in yards per route run, 2.46, 8th in PFF receiving grade, 25th in fantasy points per game, and he's a wide receiver 50, upside down face. ADP. I don't buy it. And look, this is kind of the exercise that I did as well. Going into Corey Davis, I didn't think I was really high on him. I didn't love the landing spot with the Jets. I figured that Corey Davis is really a better number 2 receiver than a number 1, where he'll kind of probably put into that role with the New York Jets. But I mean, he's going to lead the team in targets, right? I mean, that's what I would bet on. And at wide receiver 50 or 51 or wherever he's at, like, this isn't the same Jets team as last year. Do people think Adam Gase is still the head coach? Is that the issue here? It's like all the air yards last year that we were chasing with Denzel Mims and Rashad Perryman. Is that just poisoned people's minds to the fact that, no, I just can't draft Jets players? Look, I mean, we don't need to expect this Jets offense to melt faces next year with Zach Wilson, but chances are they'll probably be a little bit better. They have a different quarterback, a whole new system in place. It really can't be worse than Adam Gase. Again, it's not Corey Davis escaping Adam Gase type of upside we can expect, but the entire Jets franchise now is escaping Adam Gase. So that itself should give the offense a boost. I think it's a good fit too with Zach Wilson. You look at some of Zach Wilson's splits, whether he's throwing intermediate, whether he's throwing, mesh routes, mesh concepts. Those are things that Davis graded really well in last year at the intermediate level. He was PFF's 10th highest graded receiver. He was actually PFF's highest graded receiver on drag routes. So again, there are some particular things that stick out about Davis's game that are highlighted by Zach Wilson. So I just don't see how he can fail as the wide receiver 50 off the board. That's really because if he gets more expensive, then I would be totally fine with, okay, I'm off Corey Davis. Like, I don't expect him to repeat his efficiency numbers from last year, but at the cost of admission, it's like, I guess I love Corey Davis. I guess that's what I'm saying.
For the social graphic, all we want from that is Andrew Erickson loves Corey Davis, and we'll call that a wrap. Yeah, man, he had the game against the Bears, coming off touchdowns previous weeks. People finally trust him. He goose eggs. We had the Week 16 game against the Packers where he goose egg, fantasy championships on the line. And I was surprised to see, even in that playoff game against the Ravens, did not catch a single pass. He had those 3 duds, but he also had this ceiling that, I'm with you, man, people just seem to ignore. 5 games with over 100 receiving yards. I mean, the only guys that topped that last year, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Jefferson, Travis Kelce. Now there's arguably less target competition, man. It's like, Kenny Galladay's going to a new offense that signed him to be their number 1 wide receiver, and he's a top 30 guy. All that same stuff happened with Corey Davis, just in a, I guess less sexy offense, but the Jets passing game could easily be better than the Giants this year. Like, that wouldn't be crazy to think of. And he's going, a good 25 picks cheaper. So the one of the more wild takeaways I've had, from this looking at last year's stats is that if you just look it up, man, PFF grade, yards per reception, yards after the catch per reception, yards per outrun, Corey Davis and Julio Jones were like the same football player. And I understand one of them was getting double team, one of them was getting all the attention, the other one was Corey Davis. So no, social team, I'm not saying Corey Davis equals Julio Jones. I would say though that, for someone that is going as the wide receiver 50 and just put up, even removing Julio from the equation, just put up top 10 efficiency metrics everywhere and should again see triple digit targets. Like, yeah, it's a great example. Buying someone at their floor, not their ceiling, as we talk about all the time. And Andrew, I think someone else that I'm looking at in a similar manner, DeVonta Smith, man, someone that we like, that we've talked throughout this process, but wide receiver 37 ADP. Not even a wide receiver 3. I don't see it, man. He's my wide receiver 25 right now. I just think the on-field skills make up for the lack of size. And my goodness, dude, if he has like 10, 12 targets in week 1, like, we're not going to bat an eye. We're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. This offense is empty. Jalen Hurts threw for 300 yards in 2 of his 4 starts last year. Like, I understand. We referenced his PFF passing grade. Not pretty. Wasn't pretty the way he got to 300 yards. He still got there. It took Josh Allen 3 years to be able to say that. So for me, DeVonta, man, drafted number 11 overall to be the feature part of this passing game. Like, to me, when Jalen Reagor comes out and says he's going to be in the slot more, that doesn't tell me like it's a good thing for Reagor necessarily. That tells me that DeVonta is going to be the X and the feature guy of this passing game. So I think, in a worse situation, if we had seen DeVonta fall, wide receiver 22, the Giants maybe, took him instead of Tony in that spot. No, I probably wouldn't be quite as on him. But in this situation, man, empty offense with Jalen Hurts and, per underdogs Josh Norris on their Underdog Fantasy Football Pod, always a great listen. The Athletics, Shio Kapadia, sorry if I messed up that name, said that this is not going to be a bottom 5 offense in pass attempts. I mean, they expect this to be far closer to league average. So just from the standpoint that somebody needs to produce in this offense, that somebody certainly looks like DeVonta Smith. And, oh yeah, he just won the freaking Heisman Trophy, and he's been a baller every single chance we've seen, really, throughout his entire football career. So once the tight end feeder is gone, dude, like, DeVonta is someone, again, sitting there as a wide receiver 4 at that wide receiver 37 spot, wide receiver 4 that even if we don't expect them to have triple-digit targets, we got to know that is firmly in his projected range of outcomes.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of his size that people are kind of pegging him against, even though it didn't really make a difference at all when he was playing football at college at Alabama. And then, like you mentioned, the passing volume. Like, you look at Jalen Hurts and you think that, okay, this is going to be a run-specific team, run-heavy team. But like you just said, that doesn't seem like that's what the case is actually going to be. Like, they are going to want to throw the ball a decent amount to an average level. And if DeVonta Smith is the projected target leader, which I think it's probably between him and Dallas Goedert, depends on how you view. I mean, it's really hard to build an offense around a tight end being the lead target receiver, unless you specifically have like a Darren Waller, Travis Kelce. So that's really more of a stretch. So yeah, I can definitely get behind DeVonta Smith. Again, he's not expensive, and we are obsessed with opportunity. Like, we sometimes like overinflate it to the point where we don't even care about the talent at all. But like, I mean, there's a combination here where like DeVonta Smith is a talented receiver and he has this opportunity. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like, as much, you know, I can't walk down the street these days without someone cursing at me for my Jonathan Taylor takes, but like, it just comes down to opportunity, people. And it's very hard when guys are getting, you know, potentially 20 to 50 fewer targets for them to overcome even a lesser player ahead of them. So I would just say this. Can Zach Ertz please leave already? Like, now we got the freaking part of the offseason where, you know, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reports at least 3 teams are interested in trading for him. Come on. We've had these rumors for months now. It's infuriating, and it's the only reason why Dallas Goedert is even higher on board right now. So please, just anywhere except the Jets. I don't want to say my Jets, but anywhere except Chris Herndon's Jets. That's the only one thing, my one ask here, people. Andrew, let's keep on going with the wide receivers. Now, I liked your picks here. This is the one I will probably give you the most pushback on. What are we even doing touching this Texans offense? Why do we want Brandin Cooks, Andrew?
Hey man, Terrell Pryor had 1,000 receiving yards on a Browns team that I think won 1 game.
Ohio State built different, man.
Because he got 140 targets and he had just over 1,000 yards receiving. Not efficient at all, and he just become a wide receiver. So again, we see this all the time with some of these receivers that play with bad quarterbacks. They're the number 1 target in their offense, and because they get a lot of targets, they are fantasy producers. Again, some other examples besides Terrell Pryor, which is really more of a joke than anything else, like Allen Robinson, like, never really has good quarterback play, but he's a target monster. And that's also part of the reason why he sees so many targets, is because a lot of his passes thrown his way are inaccurate. So that's kind of why, like, it kind of adds up to actually more targets in the end for Allen Robinson, the only player the last 2 seasons to have over 150 targets. And then Terry McLaurin. I mean, that Washington football team offense last year, the quarterback play was abysmal. And he still finished as the wide receiver 18 despite, dealing with injuries and all these things like that. Look, so Brandin Cooks is my guy here that I think that is a value. Wide receiver 42 ADP. I have him within my top 35 wide receivers. Look, the quarterback situation, we don't know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be Tyrod Taylor, or it's going to be Davis Mills. And, I can spin an argument either way for, look, Tyrod Taylor, I liked him a lot going into last year because I thought that he still had a decent deep ball. Like, it wasn't bad. The last time we saw him on film was decent. And you know what? I look back at week 1. What did he have? 10.8 ADOT. 4th highest after week 1. So we know Tyrod Taylor can still sling the ball deep. So if he's the starter for however many games that is, like, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for Brandin Cooks, who obviously can win deep and make big plays downfield. And then the next guy, Davis Mills, the rookie that they drafted, number 1 in the class, 71% pass rate on his first read. Who is his first read going to be? It's going to be Brandin freaking Cooks, because there's no other receivers on this team that he would even consider going to first. I mean, we've heard Cooks talk up Nico Collins, which is great. I kind of like Jordan Akins to like a really sleeper tight end that you can take in like a 25th round of best ball if the rounds go that long. But I mean, we saw Cooks. I mean, the PFF projections, if you look at, which are it's not a bold statement on the player. It's kind of trying to take in an average based on, the target share and the efficiency numbers of the player. Look, the PFF projections have Brandon Cooks as a wide receiver 28. Like, that's like a modest guess at what he could potentially do. And he's a wide receiver 42, 45 price tag. So, look, he's only finished worse than the wide receiver 16 once since 2015. That's because he was injured. And we saw him be the wide receiver 1 in the offense when Will Fuller got suspended at the end of last year. Over 22 fantasy points per game, 28% target share when given that opportunity to be a actual, like, alpha wide receiver, which we hadn't really seen him do really in the past. He was always with another receiver. So for me, I just think that the targets are too good to pass up. And Cooks isn't just a guy. Like, I mean, he's a good receiver. He's shown that he can deliver upside, make big plays, and someone's got to catch the ball in Houston because they're going to be down by a lot.
And some of the concerns with him do seem a little misplaced. I know the concussion history is scary, but he's only missed 3 total games since 2015. I feel like he's still almost kind of getting that injury-prone label thrown around. Also, credit to him for maybe not totally reinventing himself. He was still making explosive plays with the Texans last year, but 12.6 average target depth. That was the first time since his rookie year he was under 13. He still managed to average 2.05 yards per route run. It was kind of a rough start for him, but we saw him almost used as more of a complete receiver than in the past, man. Like, it wasn't like just Cooks or Will Fuller were just this field stretching option on the outside. They were both kind of interchangeably used as 1A, 1B receivers and kind of asked to run these pretty complete route trees. So I could see Cooks being more than just a guy and getting it done. So Andrew, you've done a solid job convincing me. And even if I'm not super high on Cooks, relative to ADP, I certainly do think he's someone that you can take where he's being drafted at the value, because even as bad as, Davis Mills and these guys could be, we've only seen Cooks one time since 2014 not have a great year, and that was when he was banged up in 2019 with the bad version of Jared Goff under center. I mean, he did actually make Goff look good in 2018. 1,200 yards, 80 catches, and 5 touchdowns. Maybe in hindsight, man, we can start going back here and just pointing to all the Rams, all the great receivers on the Rams that made Goff good over the years, and Cooks was that for at least one spot. So good stuff there. And people, if you're high on Brandin Cooks and the Texans, I would say go talk to your local doctor. And after that, make sure you check out PFF's podcast network, which covers everything NFL, college, and fantasy football to get your whole football allotment. You can recap the NFL draft with Mike Renner and Austin Gale's 2-for-1 Drafts podcast, or get all the 2021 betting content you need with the PFF forecast. And also, as Andrew and I continue to talk about underdog fantasy and all these values, check out our 2021 Best Ball Draft Kit, tiered rankings for 2 projections to targetable stacks to the season's favorable matchups, the only resource you'd ever need to wreak havoc across best ball formats all summer long. Fantastic stuff from Andrew, myself, Kevin Cole, Nathan Yankee, the whole PFF fantasy gang. People, please check that out before you go into these best ball drafts. We got your basic values, your late round stuff, your straight up tiered rankings. And we also got advice, hey, what if you're in this, 1.02 spot? What if you're at the turn? Again, quick, easy to decipher information right there in the 2021 Best Ball Draft Kit. So please check that out, everybody. Andrew, I got one more wide receiver for us to break down. He is Tyler Boyd. First year of my life, I've been higher than consensus on Tyler Boyd. He's always been like Jarvis Landry for me. Just, not sexy slot receiver that, I understand the volumes there, but like, what do I even want a part of this offense for? Not so fast, my friend. We do want to be a part of this Bengals offense now, like a lower middle class man's AFC version of the Dallas Cowboys. We could see 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers, not just fantasy relevant, like top 25 wide receivers come out of this offense. So right now I have Boyd behind Chase, behind Higgins, and he's still my wide receiver 24, man. He's got an average draft position as a wide receiver 34. And I just, even though I do think Higgins can outproduce Boyd, I mean, I'm almost tempted to flip them, because if anything, Higgins is the one that should have to worry a little bit more with Chase coming on the outside, taking AJ Green's spot. Like, we could just see last year, AJ Green and Higgins were both underneath 110 targets. Like, if Burrow is in love with Chase as much as we're led to believe, man, we could just see that really start to veer more towards Chase. Meanwhile, Boyd is still, safe from the friendly confines of the slot. So in these types of crowded situations, Patriots backfield over the years, anytime there's a situation in fantasy football where we're at all worried about the pecking order, what do we say? Take the cheapest man involved. And if you want to say Auden Tate, I will not disagree with you, but in this case, that does seem to be Tyler Boyd. So, I mean, last year, weeks 1 through 11, before Burrow got hurt, Boyd was the wide receiver 28, Higgins was the wide receiver 31. Boyd had 102 targets, Higgins had 100. Like, again, Higgins is awesome. He's probably going to make a nice little leap in year 2 or year 3, you would like to think. But if we're just looking at which one is more likely to lead this team in receiving and targets, I would have to go with Boyd at this point. So only 26 years old. I mean, he had 2,000. He came off a 1,000-yard year in 2018 and 2019 alike. Would have gotten there in 2020 if Burrow was there. So to me, we're getting one of the more consistent slot receivers we've seen really, in quite some time. Him and Jarvis Landry have been those two guys to stand out over the past 5 years. And he's at a discount. So, Andrew, Tyler Boyd, man, if you end up getting these running backs early, I think he's a perfect, third wide receiver to add to the squad.
I freaking love Tyler Boyd. Love the value there. It's interesting because you mentioned that you think that T. Higgins should probably be more concerned about the arrival of Chase. And I agree with you on that, but that's not what the market is kind of telling us here by ranking Higgins ahead of, well ahead, at least a round or two. And that's something that I've kind of seen across the Twitter sphere is there really hasn't been a consensus take on, is it Higgins that gets affected? Is it Tyler Boyd that gets affected? And for me, the way I look at it is, okay, the targets probably aren't, we're not going to see a player necessarily emerge with a 25% target share in this offense. We didn't see it last year. Joe Burrow was pretty flat across the board with, 18%, 90% between all three guys, including AJ Green. So if we can assume that Jamar Chase kind of fills in that role, and then maybe it differs a little bit. Maybe Chase ends up leading the team in targets, but at the same time, the entire efficiency of the offense is going to be twice as good. Yeah. It's the exact same thing with Julio Jones, where if Julio Jones goes to the Titans, okay, if that happens, again, A.J. Brown is not going to see as many targets, but his freaking yards per route run is going to go off the freaking charts because he's going to be the most efficient receiver we've ever seen ever, because he's going to be next to the other most efficient receiver ever. And that's really what we need to look at this Bengals offense. Could that mean they're more inconsistent week to week? Yeah, because their targets may not be as flat across the board. But they're going to be scoring touchdowns left and right, all the time, because they're too talented. Defenses are going to have to focus on one of these receivers and be all right, we're going to try to take away Chase this week, or we're going to take Higgins, and then the other guy's just going to blow up. And to your point, Tyler Boyd is probably the hardest guy to game plan away. He's going to get his targets in the slot. So I think from a consistency standpoint, he makes the most sense. And for him to be last, I think that's, you scoop up that value all day.
He caught at least 4 passes in every game with Burrow under center last year. I have Chase and Higgins ahead of Boyd, but I have them right next to each other. I don't have Boyd a full 10 spots behind like the current ADP is going through. So, by the way, quick note on Julio, man. We are looking at a situation where from 2000 to 2010, the number 1 jersey in the NFL was LaDainian Tomlinson, powder blue. That's not up for debate. 2011, the present is Julio Jones, Falcons black. We get that. What if Julio goes to the Chargers and we get powder blue Julio Jones? Unrelated, but just saying, people, that could be cool. Real quickly, those 6 wide receivers we just talked about being values: Antonio Brown, Diontae Johnson, Corey Davis, DeVonta Smith, Brandin Cooks, and Tyler Boyd. Now we got a couple of running backs to go through. Andrew, how about you kick us off with Detroit Lions, A back, B back, starting backup? We don't really know, but he's going to be something. Jamal Williams.
Jamal Williams is going to be something in 2021. So originally I had Zach Moss pegged in as kind of my, okay, this is the last running back I kind of feel good about taking in anywhere point in the draft. And now I have moved off Zach Moss into that role, and now it is Jamal Williams that has taken the throne as my RB firewall, as I like to call it. Just this is my last running back before I'm just taking a dart on some undrafted rookie or some guy, or Keyshawn Vaughn basically is my other, my 18th round dart throw. So Jamal Williams, again, you hit off the top. He's getting, I can't think of another backup running back that's been talked up this much by his coaches. So I think there's some semblance to, he's going to have a role in this offense. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense that the Lions aren't talking about, we really want to get, Brashad Perryman involved and Tyrell Williams. It's it seems like this offense is going to cater to the strengths, I'm doing air quotes with Jared Goff, his strengths of a short to intermediate passer. That's where Jared Goff is the best, and you're probably going to see a ton of targets to the running backs and not these deep shots downfield of Brashad Perryman and Tyrell Williams, because that's not what Goff does well in any way, shape, or form. So it's really going to be an offense focused on the running backs and the tight ends, which those are the guys we want in fantasy. And if none of these receivers are relevant, that's totally cool with me. But specifically speaking to Jamal Williams, it surprised me. I looked at the PFF rushing grades from last year. Jamal Williams was PFF's 8th highest graded rusher. 83.3, so that also included the playoff games last year. So he was 6 spots ahead of Aaron Jones and 30 spots ahead of DeAndre Swift. So, okay, this doesn't mean that Jamal Williams is a better running back than those two guys. He's not. But it means that he can be an efficient rusher of the football. And that's something that Anthony Lynn values on his roster, which is why he's getting talked up as the early down back on this team. You can't find running backs at RB46 that are going to be guaranteed touches in any way, shape, or form. They don't exist. I've tried. Again, I'm reaching for Keyshawn Vaughn, people. Like, help me. So Jamal Williams, I think it makes just too much sense for his role to be involved. I think it'd be more surprising to see him not more involved than to see DeAndre Swift kind of carry this legit workhorse role, which doesn't really seem like it's in the cards anymore. And again, this isn't knocking on Swift either. I think it's just really about, look, Jamal Williams, like, is a good running back. Like, he's improved every year since he's been in the league. He was able to develop a snap share with Aaron Jones because they were like, yo, Jamal Williams is like good when he gets the ball now. Like, Jamal Williams used to be annoying because he sucked so badly compared to Aaron Jones, but then it was like, okay, like, he's actually not that bad. And
I don't
now
think he never sucked. It was Aaron Jones was that good. Yeah. Anybody behind him, man.
Yeah. So now Jamal Williams gets a kind of chance to be more featured in an offense, and I think that it's really worth the price of admission. He's not expensive at all to take.
He just seems like this Darrell Williams type of player where they're never going to do anything wrong. The coaching staff's going to love him because you don't have to take him off the field. And even if they aren't, quite as, alluring as, the team starter that we want to get all the touches, again, it doesn't really matter what we want. It matters what the coaches want. And we have, 4 years of evidence now that coaches were fine playing Jamal for at times, straight up over someone as good as Aaron Jones. So, yeah, man, he's going to be plenty involved. And it's just his draft position right now, which makes him such a great pick. I mean, he's going behind, Tony Pollard, Nyheim Hines, Latavius Murray, Gus Edwards. He's going behind players that he either look, he's a great 3-down handcuff in his own right. I mean, if DeAndre Swift gets hurt, we saw last year with Aaron Jones out, Jamal can go play 90% plus snaps if you want it. So he's a great handcuff, but he's going to have a weekly, probably flex-worthy role, and that's what we were just talking about, and that puts him ahead of guys, like Latavius, like Tony Pollard for me as well. So he has a higher handcuff ceiling than, the scat backs in his range, and he has a higher weekly ceiling than the handcuffs in his range. So Jamal Williams, I liked what you're saying about the firewall spot. I do agree. I think Jamal is basically the last running back you really want to take in that spot. I think Rashad Penny, someone I'm still a little bit in on, but that's a little bit more of a stretch down there with your undrafted running backs, as you pointed out. I'm actually not straying too far away from Williams and kind of the talks there with my next guy, and that is A.J. Dillon, my RB34 ADP coming in at RB39. So not a huge discrepancy, but I just think more and more, man, he's someone that we should be trying to come away with, particularly if you are, a zero RB or, one workhorse enthusiast, whatever the hell we're calling that, premium RB. I still get mad we don't have a better name. Anyway, Green Bay, they didn't add anybody else to the position. We're looking at a 2-back system and a decent chance that Dillon ends up not leading in rush attempts. I'd be surprised if that happens, but it's not gonna be the Aaron Jones just takeover show. And we saw Jamal Williams last 4 years have 178, 148, 146, and 150 touches. I wouldn't be shocked if Jones takes the majority of Jamal Williams' targets, but we almost see Dillon get a larger pie of the rush attempt there, man. It's going to be a bit of a 2-back committee. Jones will be the 1A. It depends to be seen if Dillon will be the 1B or just a straight up 2. I almost lean towards 1B, man. All we have to do is go all the way back to 2018 when Matt LaFleur gave Derrick Henry 230 touches and Dion Lewis 214 touches, man. So we have plenty of evidence of that LaFleur really doesn't know what he's doing with his running back committees, or he does and he just wants to split them up. I mean, that's still what we've seen, right? It's been Jones and Jamal, Henry and Lewis. I guess we should be assuming it's going to be Jones and Dillon, and I just don't really see that reflected right now. So we got, a potential early down workhorse and a likely top 5 scoring offense as long as they don't do the unthinkable and trade Rodgers. And man, obviously the boom factor if Aaron Jones happens to miss time is awfully big as well. So for me, A.J. Dillon, just, again, not a huge discrepancy. I only have him 5 spots ahead of his ADP, but I just really like him in that range, man, because I think there's, once again, underrated floor and ceiling combo here.
Agree with your take on the one that they call Quadfather. I think is his new nickname, is what's going around. My question for you on A.J. Dillon, do you think that he can, in his range of outcomes, do you think he can inherit some pass game work from Jamal Williams? Or do you think that that's not in his boathouse, I guess would be the best way to put it? Because, again, he didn't catch passes at college, but if you look at that Boston College offense, like the leading receiver caught like 30 passes. Like every single season he was there. So that's something that I think is and something that I'm trying to pick up more on is these running backs, whether they can catch passes or not coming out of college. And I think it's a lot less about whether they're capable of catching passes or not and more about does the offense feature running backs in the passing game? Like, we all know J.K. Dobbins can catch passes. Like, he can do it. But their offense doesn't cater to that certain skill set. Whereas Green Bay, like Aaron Rodgers peppers his guys with targets. Like Jamal Williams had over 30 catches last year. Aaron Jones is one of the best running back receiver threats in the league. Again, part of their skill set. But I think A.J. Dillon could surprise us with some work in the pass game. You know, take a screen. I mean, A.J. Dillon, man, on a screen, watch out.
It's in his range of outcomes. And, like, look, Ronald Jones is one of the worst receiving running backs I have ever seen. And he has still caught, 59 passes over the past 2 years. So, yeah, if Dillon catches, like, we don't need him to – he's not going to catch 80 passes. Like, that's never going to happen. But if he catches, like, 20 instead of 5, that could be fantastic. So, no, I don't think he's someone that's necessarily a complete zero in the passing game. We don't really know. And I think your, Boston College point holds up as well. So, those two running backs, everybody, A.J. Dillon, Jamal Williams, if you're over there at Underdog Fantasy and you just find yourself going heavy at wide receiver early, consider adding these guys. Because, again, huge ceiling if, they get some injuries, but also underrated floor if things happen to go okay. And again, people, if you like fantasy football, as we got PF Lily barking in the background, she's hyped, I'm hyped. If you like playing fantasy for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team like you normally do. But that's it. There's no in-season roster management. Underdog automatically selects your best performers each week, saving you loads of time. Go to Underdog Fantasy and deposit $10 using promo code PFF. Get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's promo code PFF. Draft now at Underdog Fantasy. Andrew, you're up next with our only tight end on the list because I agree with you here and I didn't think there was another one worth bringing up. So tell the people about our guy, Adam Trautman.
Adam Trautman, again, everyone loves Kyle Pitts, but people tend to forget it was Adam Trautman that was PFF's highest graded tight end coming out in the 2019 class. And he has the potential to be the number 2 target, I guess number 3 for counting Alvin Kamara on the Saints, because this passing game is really devoid of talent. They didn't go and fill in the roles for Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook. And if you look at those guys and how they were specifically used, end zone targets. The Saints have the most vacated end zone targets from last season. Jared Cook, specifically, he led the team in end zone targets the past 2 seasons. So that even included Michael Thomas's, crazy season. Michael Thomas wasn't like a touchdown monster really that year. Again, he caught a fair amount of touchdowns, but really it was all the other receptions that were the reason why he was so good. And that's what we need with tight ends. We need them to score freaking touchdowns. Robert Tonyan scored double-digit touchdowns last year and had like 60 targets, but he finished as a top 5 tight end because he caught a bunch of touchdowns. And that's what we could potentially get with Adam Trautman, in addition to the fact that he could also see decent targets in his offense. Because like I said, you have Traquan Smith, you have Deontay Harris, you have Marquez Callaway as these guys that we're trying to peg into roles that could potentially step up and be the wide receiver 2 on this team. But I think Adam Trautman honestly might be the best out of all of them. I think that he's the best option. Again, at the tight end position, you get some type of edge a little bit more compared to the other positions instead of, okay, there's a plenty of receivers that could potentially be a Traquan Smith or any of those guys. Whereas Trautman, I don't know if there's really another tight end like him that you can get, especially where you're getting him outside the top 15 tight ends. I believe he's tight end 16 per ADP. So again, he showed us during his rookie season nothing that would make us think that he can't take a step forward. He caught basically almost all of his passes, 94% catch rate. He finished 30 yards after the catch per reception. So basically, whenever he got a chance, he produced last year. And at college, when he played at Dayton, again, a small school, but he was a mega producer. Like, if you looked at so something I did over this past weekend was building a better and best ball type of article where I actually featured some of the tight end position. And I looked at Adam Trautman's college numbers, and his like upper percentile of outcomes was like 28 fantasy points, which is like absolutely insane for a tight end. It was like more than 10 fantasy points more than Kyle Pitts was in college. So again, it's not always one-to-one looking at fantasy points from college to the NFL, but it's interesting to look at and be like, oh my God, like this guy is used to putting up fantasy points. It's like what he did at college. So I think Adam Trautman, you can't go wrong with him. There are so many tight ends in that middle range, like Gesicki and Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, like these middling guys. You're just like, you have to take them because you're like, oh, well, they're like ranked here, so I guess I'll take them. And then you see Adam Trautman, you're like, I should have just taken Troutman. Like, oh man, like what am I doing? So you can get him 14th, 15th round. And I just think that you can feel really good about him as even a tight end too, someone to pair with another tight end with upside. I think that he's a great value for sure.
I mean, last year, before the season started, Jared Cook had climbed up to tight end 11. I think he might have even been going higher than that in 2019. Now we got a 24-year-old who was a receiving first prospect coming out, and all he did as a rookie was earn PFF's highest run blocking grade. And Josh Hill's gone. He's normally someone we see them use a lot. The only way I see him not really working out is if Nick Vanette, Central Ohio's finest, West Bowl Central, shout out. But if Nick Vanette comes in, takes his deal, and actually, makes it more of a committee, then okay, that would be unfortunate, but I don't see that being the case. And to your point, 14th, 15th round, it's like my Chris Herndon call from last year. Like, okay, I'm sorry again about that, everybody, but you didn't lose your draft because you drafted Chris Herndon. You're not going to lose because you drafted Adam Trautman. You're going to lose when you reach on a tight end at, 5 or 6 and blow off, a great wide receiver still sitting there. So Troutman, has the draft capital, 3rd round pick coming out. And yeah, I think he is looking like, the best one from that class. Cole Kmet might have had my vote, but Jimmy Graham is still there, and Lord knows he won't be traded, so maybe he'll be cut, but it's not even like a post-June 1st thing. So as long as Jimmy Graham stays there, I'm still with Troutman over Kmet, and honestly, even over Anthony Ferkser, because it's tough. I know Ferkser has more demonstrated receiving ability in the NFL, not even more demonstrated ability, just more production. He's played longer. He's only played more than 50% of the snaps, though, in like 2 of his 48 career games. I'm just not sure if the Titans even view Ferkser as someone they can keep on the field. There is some of that mystery with Troutman again, but at a minimum, he's shown us he can block. He's shown us he can catch. The Saints showed that they like him enough to let Cook and Josh Hill, leave without replacing them too severely. All in Adam Trautman, 2021. Andrew, I got us one last player. I got us to touch every position. Can you name the quarterback that I am thinking of?
It's got to be Ryan Fitzpatrick, right?
It is Ryan Fitzpatrick.
There we go.
Your 2018 QB1 in weeks 1 through 3. Your QB2 in weeks 7 through 17 behind only Lamar Jackson after taking over for Josh Rosen. And in 2020, your QB8 in weeks 1 through 6 before Tua won the job. And for those not watching our lovely faces on YouTube, I'm using finger quotes because, Fitz was the best quarterback in Miami all of last year. Dolphins fans will tell you that. And I'm not here to slander Tua. It's just a fact. Look at every single stat other than turnover-worthy play rate. And that was more because Tua was trying to be a game manager, not lose games for a contending team. But as bad as the pieces were around Tua, and we've talked about the wide receivers they were trotting out in the second half of the year, not great offensive line, like Fitz was just doing more in the exact same situation. It's why we're down on Sam Darnold, because Joe Flacco was better in the same situation last year. Like, that needs to matter. And okay, great. Fitz is out of the picture for Tua. Don't need to worry about that with him anymore. There's no competition for Fitzpatrick, man. I think the original quote from Ron Rivera in like February, he wouldn't name Fitz the starter. He's come back, though, in May and said, like, no, Ryan's the one, but everyone's going to compete. We compete every day. Yeah, Ron, great. That's what every football coach says. It's like when Bruce Arians, I'm not sure if he's ever said that Tom Brady, needs to compete, but it's always a mix between, cute and like annoying when they do this. But in Fitz's case, look at the depth chart. Taylor Heineke, okay, he had one really solid game against the Buccaneers in the playoffs. Maybe that's a sign of things to come. If you just look at him in his, 100 dropbacks we have, though, he's been awful. Like, good for him putting that playoff game together, but he has not been good the rest of his career. Kyle Allen is your token, quarterback that knows the system, and he's just going to be a backup for 5 more years because of that. And then we got Steven Montez, who's your token bad white quarterback who's athletic enough to earn a Taysom Hill comp from some idiot newspaper writer that happens to be attached to the team. So Fitzpatrick no longer has like a 1st round pick in waiting, just that we're knocking on the door trying to get this guy in. It's a great team. I mean, this defense, I think, is already anyone's idea of a top 5 unit. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Diami Brown, Adam Humphries, Logan Thomas. Weapons are everywhere. And it's looking great, man. So to me, I'm taking Fitz over Jameis, over Cousins, over Tua, over Darnold, over Wentz, and more. He's my QB 16 ADP, QB 20. I do think we got Ryan Tannehill sitting there with a QB 16 ADP. That's the only reason why I won't call Fitz, my main late round QB. But if you wanted to find late round as ADP at QB 20 or later, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, baby. I love the call. It makes a ton of sense. And again, I know we've talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick on the podcast before, and the only thing I've had to say about it is basically just how many shootouts will they play in with a top 5 defense? And again, that's kind of, you're grasping a little bit, you're nitpicking a little bit with that, because everything statistically says that Fitzpatrick, or I could be like, oh, well, Fitzpagic's just going to show up and just friggin' nuke his team. Like, yeah, you can say that, but he's been so good. Like, he's been really consistent quarterback when he's had the chance to play, like you said. He's been a great fantasy producer, and he runs. like it's an underutilized aspect or understated aspect of his game. But I mean, you saw the clip that the Washington football team tweeted out like the other week. It was him like running around, and it's like, that's what we want. Like, he doesn't hold back. Like, he has no reason to. He's like, this could be my last game ever played. Like, I don't know how long my career is going to end. I mean, he probably thought it was going to end like 5 years ago, but he got another chance. So
it's more job security than he's had in like 5 years, man, since that Jets season that he managed to go 10-6 and not make the playoffs. And the fact that's happened to Fitz twice, man, come on.
Yeah, so I can totally get behind Fitzpatrick, and again, he offers a lot more upside than a lot of other quarterbacks because again, the weapons are there. He runs, and so yeah, maybe there's a couple of games where he doesn't attempt that many passes, but if he's efficient, which based on all the statistics, he should be. So I probably got to bump up Fitzpatrick more in my own rankings.
Absolutely. So love that, everybody. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Adam Trautman as our QB and tight end, AJ Dillon, Jamal Williams as the running backs. Wide receivers one more time, Antonio Brown, Diontae Johnson, Corey Davis, DeVonta Smith, Brandin Cooks, and Tyler Boyd. That's going to do it, everybody. Thank you, as always, for listening to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. Andrew, what's on the docket for this week?
Look out for me on, go follow PFF on TikTok if you're on TikTok. I'm going to be dabbling in the account over there, so you'll see my bright, shining face doing some fun activities over on TikTok, so that should be fun. But on the website, just more content coming out, more best ball content. We have the best ball draft kit up, as Ian has spoken to already. And yeah, just trying to get everyone prepped for draft season because it's going to come up quick before you know it, and the last thing you want to do is not be prepared. But lucky for you, you got PFF to help you out.
Yeah, you can check out my articles, pff.com, 100 articles in 100 days. Of course, we got our fantasy files rolling through on this podcast as well. And people, I tried to get a haircut today. I see a little bit of the slander over there on the social media. It's okay. You guys are right. I need a freaking haircut. One guy was cracking me up. He was like, someone tell Ian quarantine's over. He can go out and get a haircut now. I tried to go before this podcast, and they hit me with a 45-minute wait at my local Great Clips at 2:30 p.m. on a freaking Tuesday. So I don't know what's going on there. Love your Great Clips. Appreciate the same buzz cut you guys have given me since I was in 8th grade. And yeah, I will work on that, everyone. And I'm also working on my freaking tan in Long Beach Island in a few weeks. So plenty of good stuff ahead. PFF.com, my hairstyle. Andrew's already got something good going on over there. And there we go. So he's Andrew. I'm Ian. This has been the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.